Hello everyone, welcome to SS Multimedia. This is Harshita Sheshala, and in this lesson we'll be learning to classify quadrilaterals. So let's get started. Our objective for today's lesson is learning to classify quadrilaterals and how they are related to each other. Before we do some questions, I just wanted to show you this quadrilateral family tree. So let's learn what quadrilaterals are, and then we can get into the quadrilateral family tree. Quadrilaterals. So quad means four and laterals means lines. So simply quadrilaterals are is basically any polygon with four lines. So remember, it has to be a polygon. So it cannot be like this. So this is not a polygon. That means this is not a quadrilateral. Okay? Now let's get into the family tree. Okay? So here I have an example of a quadrilateral. It has four lines and it's a rectangle. And then, so we have parallelograms and trapezoids. In parallelograms, we have special kinds of shapes, and few of them are like rectangles and rhombuses and squares. Okay, and also in squares, we have special kinds of shapes too, and they are rectangles and rhombuses. Okay, and so parallelograms have two pairs of parallel lines, and that's how you define a parallelogram. So a shape with two pairs of parallel lines. And the reason why rectangles and rhombuses are special kinds of parallelograms is because they also have two pairs of parallel lines. So for rectangle, these are the two pairs of parallel lines, and it's the same for rhombus too. So these are the two pairs of parallel lines. And not only that, Squares are also squares are also special kinds of parallelograms because they also have two pairs of parallel lines. And the rectangle is a special kind of square because they have all 90 degrees, and squares do too. All right, and then so all squares are rhombuses, but that doesn't mean all rhombuses are squares. And this is because a square has a right angle unlike rhombuses. Not all rhombuses have right angles. In order for a rhombus to be a square, it has to have a right angle just like a square does. Okay? Now let's do some questions. So our first part of the video or first section is writing true or false statements. So we're not going to write it. They've listed some true or false statements, and we have to choose whether it's true or false. And if we decide it's false, we have to turn that statement into a true statement. So let's do it. The first statement is all squares are rectangles. So remember what I said. Rectangles are special kinds of squares. But that doesn't mean all squares are rectangles because all squares are rhombuses too. They can be both at the same time. But this is true, however, all rectangles are squares. So, but our statement is all squares are rectangles. That means this is a false statement. And now let's turn it into a true statement. Remember what I said? I said all rectangles are squares. So we can just write that down. All rectangles are squares. Okay, are squares. Now let's move on to the next one. Trapezoids are quadrilaterals. So I'm going to draw a trapezoid, and a quadrilaterals are any polygons with four lines. And is our trapezoid, is our shape a polygon? Yes, it is. Does our shape have four lines? Yes, it does. One, two, three, and four. So that means the second statement is true. Now let's move on to the next one. So our third statement is a parallelogram is a rectangle. I'll be drawing the parallelogram, so let me just draw it. Okay, oops, that's not a parallelogram. Okay, and then I'm gonna draw a rectangle too. Okay, so here I have a parallelogram and here I have a rectangle. So one thing that we all know is a parallelogram has two pairs of parallel lines. Let's see if that is true for a rectangle. Okay, oops. Okay, so do, does a rectangle have two pairs of parallel lines? Well, they do. So that's something that gives it away. A parallelogram is a rectangle. So the main characteristic of a parallelogram is it has two pairs of parallel lines, and a rectangle has that too. So the third statement is true. Let's move on to the next one. The next one says a square is a trapezoid. I'll be drawing a square. So a square. Oops, that's not a square. So I'm gonna draw a square, and then I'm gonna draw a trapezoid. Alright, so a square has 90 degrees in its interior, and is that true? Is that true for a trapezoid? No, it doesn't have 90 degrees, so that's false. What about, does it have two pairs of parallel lines just like a square? No, it only has one pair of parallel lines because these two lines meet at some point. So that means a square is not a trapezoid, and this is a false statement. Let's turn this into a true statement. Well, one statement I can think of, a true statement I can think of, is that squares and trapezoids are quadrilaterals. So I'm just going to write that down, but there are other true statements that can be written too. A square and a trapezoids are quadrilaterals. So squares and trapezoids are quadrilaterals. Alright, now let's move on. So we have two questions over here, and what we're supposed to do is we have to name each shape. So we can say that this is just a square, but there are more names that you can call them, and that's what we're trying to find. Okay, so I'm gonna write square, and then it's also quadrilateral, so it can also be called a quadrilateral because it's a polygon with four lines, not two, four lines. Okay, and I can call it I can call it a parallelogram because it has two pairs of parallel lines. So over here, so this is one pair and this is the other pair. So this is also a parallelogram. And remember that a rectangle is a special kind of square, so you can call a square a rectangle too, right? So let's call it a rectangle. Rectangle. And also, it's also a rectangle because a rectangle has 90 degrees in all of its sides. So you can call that a rectangle too. But that doesn't mean all squares are rectangles just because they have 90 degrees. Okay? And the thing is, it's not all squares, even rhombuses can be squares too. So, yeah. And then let's move on to the next one. Is it a rhombus? Yes, it is. So a rhombus is a special kind of square, so you can just write it as a rhombus. Are all rhombuses squares? Okay, all squares are rhombuses. Okay, and in order for something to be, in order for a square to be a rhombus to be a square, the rhombus has to have a right angle. And let's move on to the next one because that's all there are. So that's all the names that we can write. Okay, so the second one is a trapezoid because it has one pair of parallel lines, and these two lines meet at one point. So this is a trapezoid, and it is also a quadrilateral because um, it is a polygon with four lines. Okay, and then there are no special kinds of trapezoids like there are in parallelograms. So that's all you can name. So trapezoids and quadrilaterals. Okay, now it's problem time. So the first question is a true or false statement, and the second question is naming each shape. So if the first statement is false, we have to turn it into a true statement. Now try these two questions on your own. So pause the video and try these two questions on your own, and then unpause once you get the answers and see if you're right. I will assume that you paused the video and tried these two questions on your own, so I'm going to tell the answers. So, true or false? A triangle is a quadrilateral. And I know this definitely is wrong because a triangle is a shape with three lines, and a quadrilateral is a shape with four lines. Okay? And also, another thing is that a quadrilateral, the interior angles of a quadrilateral adds up to 360 degrees. But for a triangle, it adds up to 180 degrees. So a triangle cannot be a quadrilateral, or a quadrilateral cannot be a triangle. So this is a false statement. Now we have to turn it into a true statement because it is a false statement. Alright, so one statement that we can say is that a triangle and a quadrilateral um, is a polygon. Or there are other statements, other true statements you can say, but I'm just gonna do that for now. So a triangle and a quadrilaterals are polygons. Okay, now let's move on to the next one. Okay, so we have to name this shape. So I know this is a rhombus because it looks like all sides are equal. Okay, we can assume that all sides are equal. So we can say this is a rhombus. And then this is also a quadrilateral because it is a polygon and it does have four lines. Now can we name it some other shapes? Well, we can name it parallelogram because it has two pairs of parallel lines. So, parallelogram. And can we name it a rectangle? No, because it doesn't have right angles. And what about a square? Well, you can't name it a square either because in order for a rhombus to be a square, it has to have a right angle. And this does not have a right angle, so this is not a square. So you can call this shape a rhombus, a quadrilateral, and a parallelogram. Okay? So that should be your answers. Those should be your answers. You cannot have a square. Okay? Thank you guys for watching. That was all for this video, and please comment down below how many questions you got right from problem time. So we have two questions. If you got 2 out of 2, good job. If you got 1 out of 2, it's okay. Keep trying. And if you got 0 out of 2, same thing. It's okay. You have to keep trying. Okay? And thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye. Like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to get notified on our new videos, make sure you tap the notifications bell.